weapon will prosper. No enemy triumph. He will not overcome. He can't scale these walls. Injustice will not win. Hell's gates will not prevail. Not on my time. Not on my watch. I am a watchman, and I take my place. As I wait, I will keep the faith. 'Cause I am a watchman, and I stand my ground. But if I never see it, I will stay the course. I will run the race, I will fight the fight, and I will keep the faith. I keep my eyes fixed on you.
Hello there. Welcome to Noon Prayer Watch. It's Friday. The weekend is here. Shabbat Shalom. Hope y'all had a great week out there, and I hope you'll have an even greater weekend coming right up here. Believe some of you in America there's a national holiday Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Some of you guys might have a 3-day weekend, so congratulations if you're one of those. We actually had one last week here in Japan, and we'll have another one next week, so we're blessed. Different holidays, of course. We have, birthdays of emperors and things like that. That's what's going on here. So hope you guys have a great week accordingly. We are going to go ahead and jump straight into the topic. I'm going to continue what I have been talking about the last couple of weeks, and that is East Asia analysis. This is where we take a little bit of time, look at a certain nation in East Asia, and talk a little bit about them. Lots of countries over here. I'm sure not everybody out there that watches this program knows about some of these nations, even if they exist. Maybe they don't. But also what the situation is spiritually and things like that. What's going on with some of these countries, because they're really important in the future. I believe that there's going to be revival. There's going to be big movements of God in these nations. And so, again, one of the objectives of this series is to get some information out there. It's not supposed to be exhaustive or comprehensive or like an expert analysis or presentation or anything like that. It's just kind of general information. A lot of this is kind of just general information, but also stuff that I know. I've had the opportunity to live in East Asia for quite some time. I have been to some of these nations and also have met people from these nations. And today's country that we're talking about is one of those in particular. Now, let's go ahead and throw up my map. Visual aid. Oh, also, we got to put that on too. There we go. So as always, let me rearrange this. Yeah, here we go. As always, starting over here with Japan, this is where I am. You can see Osaka there. That is where I live. That's where I'm broadcasting from. And so, first week we talked about Korea, which is right next to Japan. And, always want to point out that these nations are actually quite big. South Korea in particular is a little small, but Japan's really big. It's about the size of the East Coast in America. I don't know if you can see that all the way over here. And then we talked about the week after, we talked about China and the situation going on there. We're going to go a little bit south. We have Taiwan here. Japan's up here. Taiwan's here. We're going to go south to this group of islands called the Philippines. I'm sure you've heard of it. Very famous nation. You probably met someone from this nation. You might know someone. Filipinos all over the world. Everywhere you go, you'll find them. But we're going to talk about this nation. It's pretty big. It's actually, I'd say, a little bit smaller than Japan. not sure, like surface area. Japan's probably a little bit bigger, but this is a big nation and it has a lot of people on it. Okay, going to go throw out some general information for you here, and then we're going to get into the more of the spiritual side of what's going on with the Philippines. This nation has 114 million people, and that's a lot of people. That's about a third of the population of America, with a lot less land to live on. I remember a couple years ago, I was talking with this kid. He was this young man from the southern part of the nation. He was really fascinating. He knew so much about the history, and he shared a lot of interesting things with me. But brief history lesson, maybe you didn't know. Back in the day, late 1800s, America and Spain fought a war in which America won. And one of the things they received from Spain was Puerto Rico. I think you might know about that. Still part of America, not a state, but about as close to a state as you can be without being a state. But also the Philippines were given to America as part of that resolution of that war. And this kid was telling me, he was like, there was talk about making the Philippines part of America. It would be like a state, which would be crazy because that's a third of the population. There would be a massive amount of political power in the Philippines had that actually happen. Of course, it didn't. They sought independence. After that war, America held on to it, but when World War II broke out, Japan took over East Asia and took away the Philippines from America. I think in 1946, the Philippines got their independence, and they've been an independent republic ever since. So, yes, that is the Philippines. A very brief history, not exhaustive at all. There are lots of islands. If you zoom in, you might see them. Believe it or not, there are over 7,000. There are 7,641 islands on this nation. Some of them, they go all the way down here, close to Malaysia, way down here. Yeah, Malaysia. We're going to talk about Malaysia in the future. It's a very important nation. And it's a very diverse, very eclectic collection of cultures and languages and things like that. There are, according to the internet, 182 native languages on this island, as well as 4 extra languages which have gone extinct because people no longer speak them anymore. That's kind of what happens when you unify. And that might kind of blow your it kind of might kind of blow your mind. We kind of talked about this last week with China. China has like 50 something languages. And it's like, how can that happen? Like, this is one nation, all these people live together. How is that possible? And I think those of us from Europe, those of us from America, it's kind of hard to fathom because we only have one language. And we, with English, we benefit from a very rich literary history in which there's things like Shakespeare and dictionaries and things like that kind of help standardize the language and kind of ironed out really harsh regional differences and dialects and things like that. And other nations in the world, especially in East Asia, haven't really had that opportunity. The languages, you have like a tribe or an island, and a a language will be birthed there and be spoken there, and you might meet someone on the next island and you learn their language, you can speak their language or whatever, but you also speak yours back at home. And so when it comes to this part of the world, so many small groups just kind of stayed together the whole for a long period of history, and the language still persists to this day. But now, of course, these countries are unifying, they're becoming more fleshed out, and they usually pick one, whatever the most popular language is or something, and they speak that, if not English as well, or a couple of different languages in which they recognize as official. And in the Philippines, Filipino, or as they call it, Tagalog, is the official language, but they also, of course, speak English. They learn it, they speak it, they use it in government and in daily society. So if you meet someone from the Philippines, they will know English. Every person I've ever talked to, both in that country and outside of it knows English because they learn it in school. There also are 19 other local languages that are recognized as official languages. So it's really impressive. Most of the people you meet in the Philippines will know, English, will know Tagalog, the Filipino national language, and then whatever their local language is. And so they can easily, switch between them talking and things like that. And that's for us in America, that's very impressive. A lot of us have a hard time with one language, but we're trying our best, right? Filipino is an interesting language, or Tagalog is an interesting language. It is a Malaysian Polynesian language. Malaysia is, of course, this island to the south over here, southwest. But also, we have you can't really see them, but there's a bunch of islands way out here in the ocean. These guys, their language, family, that's like the main language. But because of the history of the Philippines, because of the proximity to China, there's a lot of Chinese influence, a lot of Chinese words in this language, as well as Spanish. Spain ruled. I mentioned this earlier. They ruled the Philippines for a long time, and so there is a lot of Spanish loanwords in the language. And if you know Spanish, a lot of us in America, especially in the South, we take Spanish. That's our go-to foreign language. We usually forget a lot of it after we study it, of course, but I studied it quite a bit in, grade school and also university. Took 3 semesters of it. So I know a lot of vocab. So it's really interesting going to the Philippines and listening to people talk, especially in church, like, the pastor speaking. And, every 10, 15 words, I recognize a word because it's a Spanish word. The word that I heard they use for church, is iglesia, which is Spanish for church. And then you'll just listen to people talk and you'll pick out words. And it's just really interesting because obviously Spanish isn't the native language in this area. It's because of colonization back in the day, but it still persists in the language. So it's really interesting. Really, really interesting. So yeah, you have a very unique and eclectic blend. You have, and of course, English influence, American influence is becoming really big in the Philippines now. America ruled it, but also they, were becoming a more globalized international society, and so they learn English, but also connect with America and such like that. So let's talk about religion. What's the religious situation in the Philippines? What's the religious situation in the Philippines? Indeed. One thing that is very unique about this nation is that freedom of religion, according to the people who, calculate these statistics, it's very, very high. So whatever religion you want to believe in, you have freedom to do that. This hasn't been the case. This isn't usually the case in this part of the world. Japan has had persecution. Korea has had it. China has had it. A lot of the nations around the Philippines have it even today. But Philippines does not. It's a pretty free society when it comes to practicing the religion that you want. 84% of this nation is Christian. 84%. And most of those are Catholics. 79% of those are Catholics. And this is a result of Spanish colonization, as I mentioned earlier. In the 16th century, some of the first explorers from Spain, Portugal, and Spain arrived in the land, and then they, long story short, claimed it, ruled it for hundreds of years. And as Catholic nations like to do back in the day, they really heavily pushed Catholicism, and it grew. And they suppressed the indigenous religions, also Buddhism, Hinduism, things like that, and Catholicism grew. Now, in the southern part of where'd my map go? In the southern part of the Philippines, like a lot of these islands down here and this area over here. I don't know if you can see my mouse. This area over here, Islam is very popular, which makes sense because these islands over here, Islam is also very big. And it kind of just, back in the day when Islam was spreading its legs, it kind of just went up in through here. But when the Catholic Church was heavily, influencing this area, they kind of pushed back on Islam and kept it down to the south. And so even today, it's only 6%, 6.4%. But Islam has been in this nation for this area for about, since the 14th century, 200 years before the Catholics started coming. And what's really interesting about the Philippines is, according to stats, 0.0004% of the population is non-religious or irreligious, which is very, very unusual. It's incredibly unusual because, we looked at stats. We talked about Japan all the time, of course, but we talked about, Korea and China. Irreligion, or, no religion, people who don't claim any religion, is the norm. It is what most people identify as. And I would say, we're going to see when we look at other nations here later, it's going to be high in some of these nations neighboring the Philippines. But when it comes to the Philippines, most people claim a religion. They believe in some sort of faith. So they're a very spiritual, very faithful people. So just, on paper, again, most of those are Catholic, but, Islam kind of makes up the rest of that. And then there's, a small percentage that believes in folk religion. 0.2, 23% to be exact. And I'm not going to get into what that is, but it's very similar to what we find in Japan, we find in other nations prior to the rise of, Hinduism and Buddhism, ancestor worship and things like that. Some basic idolatry and all that kind of stuff. And so people who exclusively practice that today, they're not really a significant population. But as we find with lots of Catholic nations, you see a lot of these practices and traditions and legends being mixed with, what we would call Christian practice or whatever. And so we call that syncretism. And in general, when it comes to the Protestant world, that is not acceptable, but it is in Catholic areas. And so you might have a lot of, or a little bit of, idolatry mixed in with people who claim to, be Christian or whatever. So that is that. That's just basic general information. I would now like to talk a little bit about my experience in the Philippines. I have had the opportunity twice to go to the nation. Flew into Manila, and then I have some friends and we have a church that we're connected with here in Japan. I have no idea where exactly the city is. It's called Vegan. It's somewhere up in here in the north. But basically, it's really hard to drive or take a bus straight up. So you got to fly an airplane all the way to the north and then drive a couple of hours south to where you're going to go. Here it is, Vegan City. It's on the coast here. It's really interesting because there's a lot of Spanish architecture here. It's a kind of a touristy area, a little bit. But yeah, instead of going from, I heard it takes, 7 hours or whatever to take a bus from Manila, the capital, down here up to here. So you got to fly and kind of drive down. Anyway, I've been there twice, had the opportunity to go there twice. Fantastic people. Everybody is super sweet, super friendly. People will, like, if you're from out of town, you're walking down the street. I had two people, they don't know me. They're like, "Hey, can we take a picture with you?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I don't know what they did with that picture, but I'm not a famous celebrity or anything, but they just wanted my picture. So super cool. Everybody's friendly. At least they were to me. I'm sure, some people might not be, but every country has friendly people and unfriendly people. But I had a great time there. The church it was a mission trip. I've been to two mission trips there, and we did ministry and things like that. There, did worship, prophetic ministry, praying for healing and things like that, giving words. It was great. It was fantastic. I will say this: when I went there, I think the second time, it's the only time in my memory that I heard someone speak in tongues and I understood what they were saying. There was an old lady in a service who started yelling out in Japanese in the middle of the service, claiming God to be great and things like that. And all of us who knew Japanese were like, "Whoa, that's interesting." I don't know if she, he was an old grandma in the middle of the countryside. I don't know if she ever had an opportunity to learn Japanese, but we kind of took that as a tongue experience. there. So that was pretty cool. Um, prophetic when we do prophetic ministry there, it's really interesting. Like I don't know, it's really easy to pray and get stuff and really hit people, I guess you could say. And so it's really encouraging to do ministry there. People are very open and very receiving of what you have, um, what God gives you. And so one great thing about the Philippines is, as I mentioned earlier, English is an official language, and that means they learn it in school their whole lives. And so because everybody there knows English, it's very easy to connect with people. Both people, like, if you go to a church or something, but also if you're out on the street somewhere. I was swimming on the beach one day, and there was just a couple of kids swimming around, and they're like, "Hey, what's your name? Where are you from?" Remember one kid, he's like, "My name's Lawrence." Lawrence, that's not a Filipino name. But it's a very English name. I don't know if we name people Lawrence anymore. But anyway, shout out to you, Lawrence, if you're watching. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, really easy to connect with people. So it's easy to do ministry. Yeah, not everybody is like fluent in English like they would be their local language. And some people aren't at all. Like you do need a translator sometimes. But for the most part, you can, pray for people, hang out with people, and talk with them in English, and especially young people. And it's really cool that you can do that. That you can't do that in every nation because not everybody studies that language. So really easy to kind of connect and flow with people. Um, and as I mentioned earlier, knowing a little bit of Spanish helps too, because if you ever do want to learn their language one day, if you were so called to go to this nation, if that God puts it on your heart, learning Tagalog, you'll get a leg up in learning that if you know Spanish, because a huge part of the vocabulary has just Spanish nouns and things like that, like shoes. The word for zapatos is a word that they use. Okay. Let's see. Philippines, in and of itself, it is an emerging nation, or we say a developing nation. We kind of like to say first world or third world, and some people out there, the people, how can I say? I don't want to say the woke people. That's not it. The politically correct people. That's the right word. They don't like the term first world, third world. And I kind of get it, because it goes back to like the Cold War. Third world was the nations connected to the USSR. First world was the West. And the Cold War is over. And so those terms, some people argue, are kind of not really relevant anymore. And so they like to say now is a developing nation. And you go to the Philippines, and it's got this kind of old school, quote unquote, third world vibe, but then they have a lot of, like, technology and other new things that sometimes I don't even see in America. I remember I went there, oh man, the first time, it was about 9 years ago. And in the Philippines, it's like people are living in these shacks everywhere, but everybody's got a cell phone, and you can order McDonald's on an app from your phone, and they'll have a little scooter come bring it to your house. And I was like, we don't have that in America. And like a lot of little things like that, a lot of little technological advanced things that they're doing in East Asia, but we don't really have that in America, America, the richest nation in the world, things like that. So it's really interesting to go there. It's an emerging nation, it's a developing nation, and so they're going to advance in certain areas, because they're kind of starting from scratch when we're talking about developing as a nation, coming from poverty to people having enough money, disposable income, and things like that, becoming middle class, so to speak. So, when I'm in the Philippines, what I really feel is like there is a lot of potential. That's the best way I can describe it. The people, there's a lot of potential. Like when I go there, I'm like, why isn't this nation more influential in the world yet? I think in the future we might see that, but I just feel like when we talk about England, we talk about America, the English speaking, these are the two biggest nations in the English speaking world, Australia too, sometimes. These nations influence the world, not just the English speaking world, but other nations too, because everybody, especially young people in general, speaks English or understands it, or, will watch movies or listen to music or watch TV shows or things like that. And so people who speak English and are from these countries, very influential. And I'm like, when I'm in the Philippines, I'm like, why isn't this nation not as influential as some of these other nations? There's so many people here. There's so much potential for economic opportunities, creative opportunities, media, things like that. And it hasn't been enough breakthrough. I feel like there's a lot of potential there, but there's something really holding the nation back. And so economically, I think you're going to see Philip in the future. You're going to see the Philippines more and more become influential. Their population, unlike a lot of the other nations in this area, as far as I know, is not going down. Abortion is illegal in this nation. It's Catholic. And so they don't really have a problem when it comes to having children. And their population will not be declining, as far as I can tell, anytime soon. So when you got people, you got workers, you got people who are creative, and that helps the economy. It helps the country be influential in the world. And so we have a doctrine of life coming from the Bible, of course, Judeo-Christianity, in this nation, and that I think spiritually sets up the nation to be in a good position going on into the future. And so economically, but also spiritually, I see potential. I see so much potential. Again, because one thing, they know English, and so they can go to other nations who can speak English, and they can engage with the saints there, the kingdom there, and more easily connect. The language barrier isn't really a thing there. And on that note, I think this nation, the Philippines, is a nation that can easily connect with the rest of the world. Again, both normal when it comes to international relations, cultural things like that, but also spiritually. And it's because, again, everybody can speak English. American culture is very popular there. A lot of Filipinos go to America as well as other nations. But also, they have close proximity with China and Malaysia, Indonesia, these other massive nations around them, and they have an ability to connect to these nations because of history and things like that, culture and all that sort of stuff, language, food, um, philosophy, things like that. And so the nation is just incredibly unique. It's just a mixture, I don't want to say hodgepodge, but just like all of these different influences and factors kind of morph this nation into being this unique nation that, again, has a very high potential and can really help the kingdom going forward. Okay, how we doing? Yeah. So that's kind of what I have to share. Gonna throw out some prayer points for you guys, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you for listening to me talk about the film. I can go on and on. The food, by the way, is pretty good in the Philippines. I know that's not really a spiritual thing, but I one pastor I know always pointed out, Jesus in the Bible, he's eating a lot of meals. He loves to hang out with people, share meals with people, and in the Gospels and such. And so I think food is important. So when you go to places, you meet people, have a meal with them, you create memories, you create relationships that way. And my recommendation in the Philippines is the fried chicken. Every nation has the fried chicken. It's pretty common, but I really enjoyed their fried chicken at this place called Chow King. They also have a hamburger joint called Jollibee. Everybody likes to talk about that, but I like the Chow King place. And yeah, if you like fruit kind of stuff, mango, banana, things like that, smoothies are fantastic. You can get smoothies anywhere. And also coconut based foods and drinks. I personally didn't really like coconut It's kind of weird. Not really familiar with it, but having gone to the Philippines so many times and tried a lot of their foods, I actually kind of like it now. And so there's some other foods that are out there that not going to recommend. It's really famous. One involving an egg. Not a fan. Um, my wife, however, had it. She ate it without knowing what it was. Anyway, we're not going to get into that. We're going to try to keep things a little bit more spiritual. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. Prayer points. I prayed about it. We're going to pray about this week for the Philippines. First thing, kind of mentioned this already. We pray that the kingdom in the Philippines or outside of it, missionaries and such, that they will unlock the potential of this nation. I don't know how else to say that. Maybe if some of you out there go to the Philippines one day, you can see for yourself what I'm talking about. But there's just so much potential there, and it needs to be unlocked. It's like just wrapped up. It needs to be unwrapped and let loose. We pray that the kingdom in the Philippines will expand and influence and tear down strongholds holding back the nation. I can't really speak to this because I'm an expert on this nation when it comes to like the spiritual situation. Again, Catholicism is the biggest nation, but as I said, there's a lot of mixture of folk and pagan stuff, as that's what happens. And I do think that some of that stuff is holding back the nation, aside from all of the Catholic stuff that we usually have to deal with. And so we pray that the kingdom will, of course, tear down strongholds, both within the church as well as outside of it. We pray that believers in the Philippines will continue going out, spreading the kingdom to the nations. That's one thing you see when you talk to young people. They all want to leave and go, various countries throughout the world. And that, more power to them. Lord be with them if that's what the Lord has, for their destiny. They have an opportunity to spread the gospel, spread the kingdom in nations. We kind of talked about this last week when it comes to China, but when it comes to doing jobs and finding work in like the Middle East and Africa and other places, people from East Asia have more of an open door to go to these places than, say, from people from the West, because of past religious and geopolitical drama. It's just very difficult, but it's a lot easier with these nations that there's not really a history with. And so we also pray that believers that go to the nations, both at home, in their own country as well, but when they go abroad, that the Lord protect them as they do the work, as they spread the kingdom to the ends of the earth, because we need that, right? And then the last thing, we pray for an increase in creativity and influence in the international world. I want to see Filipino movies and music and just creative things, creative arts, media. We're talking about the media world and all that kind of stuff. I want to see people from this nation participate in that, because they have the potential to do that. I see that on them, and it's just I don't know what else to say other than it just needs to be unlocked. And so we pray that the Lord's will be done in that nation. I hope this encouraged some of you out there. If you have a heart for the Philippines, pray about going. Pray for open doors. Pray for opportunities, because it could be a place for you to go. I'm not saying it is, but you got to pray with that. Got to talk to your leaders and such, or even go there on short-term missions trips as well. You can always do that. And in the future, I might go back. I have opportunities to go sometimes, so pray for me as well if I am to do that. So that is it. That's all I got for you this week. Thank you for listening. We're going to come back next week with a different nation. Can you guess which one it is? You'll find out. You'll have to tune in next Friday. So thank you guys. I hope you guys have a great week. Thank you for watching or for catching up on the replay. That's all I have for you. I will see you. Be blessed. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.